world record holder. This is Lu taking out 7 world record holder. You'll see why. Welcome back to 1 week with Team China. This is the third part of the whole thing and covers days 5, 6, 7 and I think even 8. And I put day 5 as the last session for this video just because I've previously uploaded a few years ago a lot of the lifts from that session, so I don't want to show you what you may well have already seen. So we're going to jump to day 6, then do 7, 8 and then back. So in this session we had, as you can see, Wenwen, the strongest female weightlifter in the world, and Tian Tao, known, I guess, by many around the world as the #1 cleaner. I guess in part really because of the, was it 236 or 7 kilos that he hit at the previous World Championships in that 96 kilo class that he's lifting in here. So this 130 kilos, he works up to, I think, 210 kilos. It was most that he hit in the clean and jerk at this World Championships in 2019 until, of course, the competition where he, for the first time, actually became world champion, which I think surprises a lot of people because Tian Tao is such a well-known name in weightlifting. He's probably a top 10 most recognized names currently, sort of as an active weightlifter. I say active, we haven't really seen him lift since the Asian Championships in 2021, so it's been just over a year, but even so, somewhat active. But yeah, he's only become a world champion once and probably would have become the Olympic champion in Tokyo had he been selected by Team China, but such are the trials and tribulations of trying to get selected for Team China. They always say, as I'm sure many of you have heard, the hardest thing about winning the Olympics is getting selected on the team. For most of these Chinese weightlifters, if you're put on the team, you're probably going to win. In fact, only one athlete last year who was selected on the 8 roster Chinese team didn't end up winning. That was Lu Xiaojun, the 55 kilo weightlifter from China. We just saw there as well Wang Zhiyu with, I think that was 150 kilos she just did in the clean and jerk, and she is just one of the most remarkably strong weightlifters you'll ever see. She snatched 126 kilos at the Asian Championships last year and then clean and jerked 160 kilos, which is just the kind of weight that would medal at an well, it did medal at the Olympics in the clean and jerk in the super heavyweight category. It would medal at the Worlds as well. That's the end of that session. I'm just going to keep talking about Wang Zhiyu just while we watch Yang Zhe warm up, because she just has such an incredibly strong pull. She's kind of like Shizi Ong in that every clean that she makes looks as though she's trying to power clean it, and then she has almost like an awkward transition as she then sort of turns off the work that she's doing in the leg. It's almost like she's trying to apply the brakes for her power and then realizes that's not going to work, and so she then relaxes and goes down into the squat and comes back up. But she is just absolutely incredible. She does the same thing in the snatch as well to some degree. Here's Yang Zhe. This was a few days out from him competing, and it's worth remembering this was his first ever world record that he set, was at this competition. It was the famous, we had 3 world records in a row at 197, 198 and 199. And then 2 years later, after this, he would snatch 200 kilos, and that was at the Asian Championships just over a year ago. And that 200 is obviously a milestone. In fact, this is his last workout here. 200 kilos is obviously a milestone. Very few non-supers have ever hit that kind of weight in competition. Most recently, before it was Yang Zhe, it was Andrei Romnau, of course, who did it. The heaviest over 200 kilos snatch by a non-super is 210 kilos. That's Yuri Zakharevich. He did that in the 110 kilo category. He's also the heaviest person to snatch 100 kilos over body weight, incidentally. And the lightest person to ever do it is Niku Vlad, who did 200.5 kilos he was under 100 kilos in body weight, which is just ridiculous. So there is another session, the biggest session of this competition, of this video, sorry, that's going to have Lu and Tian and Yangzhe going kind of heavy in the snatches and squats. This is actually, we're seeing right now Yangzhe and Li Wenwen in their final sessions before they compete, and they both set world records and do incredibly well. And then we see a few other athletes, like we're seeing here, Deng Wei, just lifting, training essentially despite having already competed and set world records previously. Here's 115 kilos for Li Wenwen. It's very light. It's an easy power snatch type of weight for her. And you see with these heavier athletes, they tend to not push the snatch or clean and jerk anywhere near as heavy as a lot of the lighter athletes do in this final week before competition. I would say it's because, for Li Wenwen, if she hits a 180 clean and jerk, that's going to take a lot more out of her than if Chen Lijun hits a 160 clean and jerk or something like that. But then at the same time, she did some extremely heavy squats. She did some extremely heavy pulls as well, up to 230 kilos, and squatting up to 225 as well. So I'm not really sure. There's Yangzhe. 220 kilos for him. His best ever clean and jerk in competition is 225 kilos. So just to be repping that out for multiple reps, multiple sets. Was there a 5 on there? Let's see when he re-recs it. I think they might have stuck a 5 on. So is that a pause 230? I think it is. So that's a pretty heavy weight to be doing 2 days out from competition. There we have, is that 135? Yeah, 135 kilos. And then this is that final day. And some of you remember this session. I posted most of the list from this back in 2019, but it's still a great session. One of the most enjoyable sessions I've ever filmed. Certainly one of the funnest to go back and watch through. It's Tian Tao, it's Lu Xiaojun, and it's Yangzhe. It's the boys. And they're just putting in some impressive work here. So here we see Tian Tao is looking very thick, working up in the snatch to a top set, pretty much right around his opening snatch. Lu Xiaojun working up to, again, pretty much a max back squat. He already worked up to a pretty maximal front squat on his first day in the training hall, 240 kilos. You can see that in part 1 of this Week with China little series that I've done. And then Yangzhe works up pretty heavy in the snatch before going even heavier in the snatch pulls, and then he does some other variations we'll talk about when we get there. So 60 kilos from Tian Tao. Of course, he just drops the weight when he catches it in the hole. Not all athletes do this, but plenty of them do at the higher level. The hardest bit about the snatch is catching it and securing it in the bottom position. The easiest is standing it back up. So as soon as he knows that he's caught it, it really doesn't do a whole lot for him to stand it up, other than maybe just fatiguing him ever so slightly. But again, barely. It's probably more that he just can't be bothered. He's performed so many reps, he knows that he's made it at that point. So 60, 90, I think he jumps to 110 after that. And beside him was Yangzhe warming up. And it's interesting because, Yangzhe out-snatches Tian Tao by basically 20 kilos. Tian Tao's best snatch in competition, I think, is 181. Yangzhe's done 200, so 19 kilo difference, basically 20 kilos. It's 10%, essentially. Tian snatches 90% of Yangzhe's snatch, but then in the clean and jerk, Yangzhe snatches, or clean and jerks, like 7% of Tian Tao. Tian Tao just has a much better clean and jerk. And partly it's the proportions, but it's also the fact that Tian Tao is limited in the snatch. He said in interviews before, Chinese interviews, by the length of by his hand. He said he's got incredibly small hands, and the hook grip is almost impossible for him to do in the snatch. His thumb barely gets under that index finger. For those of you who don't do weightlifting, the grip in the snatch and clean and jerk, you actually wrap your thumb underneath your fingers, and that kind of acts as a way of, it creates a little bit of extra friction between the thumb and the fingers, which makes it harder to let go of the bar, so you can relax your arms and you're not going to let go as you accelerate the bar. He has a hard time doing that. It's a little bit easier for him in the clean because suddenly you gain a little bit of extra room to push your thumb under. But in the snatch, it's not so easy for him. So partly that's the reason why he's so far behind in the snatch compared to Yangzhe. But also it's just the fact that Yangzhe's a bigger, stronger, longer limb person, and these long limbs help a little bit more with the snatch. They don't help so much in the clean and jerk. And you can just see with Yangzhe in the clean and jerk, he's just a little bit almost awkward. It just doesn't look very fluid, whereas for someone like Tian, he looks like he was built to clean and jerk. So there's 130, pretty easy lift, and alongside them snatching, of course, on the third platform, is Lu Xiaojun working up in the back squat. I've actually interviewed Lu once. I'm sure some of you have seen the interview. It was about half an hour long. It was really great. It was the first interview he'd ever done with, I guess, what you refer to as maybe like Western media. And we spoke about the back squat. I asked him all of his PRs, and he said that he'd back squatted 305 kilos as his best. There's 270. Now, right there, it definitely doesn't look like he could do 305. But of course, he's not at his strongest there. Although he is basically his heaviest. I mean, he's an 81 kilo lifter. But yeah, 305 kilos. He said that he front squatted 270 kilos, which is just absolutely incredible. And then, of course, a few days after this, despite being, I think he was 36 at the time of this, he's 38 now, he set a world. Was that a power snatch? Pretty much a 160 power snatch by Tian. Lu ended up clean and jerking 207 kilos, which is a world record. It beat Li Dayin by 1 kilo, hit 206. He set 2 world records in the total, not his best ever total, he's totaled 380 before, but it was one of his best ever totals here. And I mean, to be doing that at that age, you know, is just remarkable. Here's 150. Yang Zhe is just an absolute master in the snatch. His pull looks slow, but it's just amazing. He's also got these enormous erectors running up his back. It's the same with Tian Tao. Neither of them are the most defined, you know, necessarily jack-looking lifters, especially when you compare them to the slightly leaner, shorter counterparts in the team. But they have these enormous muscles in their back, which you can really see when they turn to the side. 260 kilos now, just some holds. Another interesting thing to mention about Lu's squat, which you might have seen, was the fact that he shifted so far over to his right leg, which he's mentioned in the past. He just has, I don't know if it comes from an injury of any type, but he has a weakness on one side, which is why you see him doing a few different variations on the lifts, like, sorry, not on the lifts, just exercises, accessories. You see him doing things like banded one-legged step-ups, where he just steps up onto, you know, a stack of 25s or something, just on his right side, trying to strengthen that right glute. And he has a band around that knee that's trying to pull his knee in medially, so he's having to externally rotate even harder whilst extending at the hip and at the knee, just to sort of work on that. And we see him as well doing some stroke press, which is something we don't really ever see from Lu. If he ever does a shoulder exercise, it seems to be that's enormously strong, 250. With Lu, it seems to always be Lu raises, as he's made them known. Lateral raises, essentially, just with a slightly greater range of motion. If you want to know more about why he does a lot of these exercises, he does answer it all in that interview. And of course, he's older, so he has to focus a lot more on recovery than most athletes do, and that's why he has ice around both knees. As soon as he's done with his squats, the ice goes on. You know, they're just trying to reduce inflammation, which athletes don't always want to do, because, you know, you just don't always want to reduce inflammation. Sometimes, well, oftentimes inflammation is there for good reasons, trying to flush out, you know, some horrible things from in the joints. But this close to competition, they wanted to reduce that inflammation, and so it's just ice on straight away as soon as he's had that big exposure to a heavy stimulus in the back squat. I also asked him about why he does heavy strength exercises so close to competition, but not necessarily a heavy snatch, or like Lu did not do a 160 or even a 150 snatch at this, you know, prior to this competition in the training hall, and he was there for like 9 days. He just said that his technique is so good at this point, he just doesn't really feel like he needs to do that. He just needs to feel strong and know that he's strong. And then again, this is pretty classic with the Chinese athletes. Not a lot of athletes in other teams do this. They focus heavily on accessories. I mean, we saw earlier Yang Zhe doing dips, Tian Tao there doing a static hold with what was 30 kilos, Lu now doing 50 kilos hip extensions. Again, just getting a load of blood flow into that lower back, glutes, hamstrings. I've heard various coaches talk about this before. It's like, if these are the exercises that got you strong, you don't want to stop them too much, too far out. Obviously, they're not going to do this to failure, because the last thing they want is too much muscle damage, you know, a few days out from competition. But even so. Anyway, that's the end of this workout. I don't want to go on for too long. I hope you enjoyed this. This is basically a full week of training with Team China. We're going to get loads more with Team China at this upcoming Asian Championships. I fly out in a day's time. We're going to be with them, some of these newer, great athletes who we've not seen before. So make sure you tune in to the Weightlifting House YouTube, subscribe if you haven't already, and grab the Asian Championships pay-per-view to watch every single session live and on demand.